Good day, everyone, and thank you so much for joining C.H.L.M.S Medi-Helpz Foundation in its first annual Black His Health, I should say, in History Month. That first means, yes, we do intend on coming back and bringing additional information the same time next year. What we're hoping is that we have some other nonprofits that are in the health space and have Black, you know, people on board or want to talk about Black subjects that are impacting the lives, negatively impacting the lives, and hey, even positively impacting the lives of African Americans slash Blacks in this country and global. We're hoping that we can expand on this, and this time next year, have even more people stepping up to the plate and saying, "Well, you know what? Chom's led the led the field for having this, but now we're here, so we're going to do this together." Collaboration is key, and it's such a key component when it comes down to the African American community. Actually, all communities, right? But as I stated yesterday, we got to get ourselves together first, and then we can go ahead and start collaborating with other people and what they're doing so that together we move forward, because it is together that we rise. But we have to, it's of an utmost importance that we begin to seriously take what we know and use it for those who are less fortunate than what we have. Well, today we have been blessed. We got a duo. A duo. We got two for the price of one. No, we got two awesome people in the world of clinical research and clinical trials. They're going to share with us today the information that we need to know in order to be able to, consider when we're challenged with health challenges, consider stepping outside that box and becoming a clinical trial participant. They're going to talk to us about why it's important for African Americans not just to be participants, but also to be providers from the stakeholder side. They bring to the table an experience that maybe many others don't bring to the table because they've lived this experience. So they're actually able to touch patients in a way that a lot of other people, a lot of other clinical trials may not be able to. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our two awesome guests. First, I'm going to take Gaina Whitaker. She has over 25 years of clinical research experience and an MBA in pharmaceutical marketing and healthcare management. That lets you know she knows what she's doing, right? There's no way you spent 25 years. That's the same thing with me. I've been in healthcare for 30 years. There's no way you can say, well, you don't know what you're doing, right? Because she knows what she's doing. She started her career in 1997 as a clinical research coordinator at the Nathan Spear Regional Burn Center at Crozer Hospital, where it sparked the flames for a strong interest in clinical research. She got it early. She kept it. It was something that sparked her interest, and she was like, I'm going to stay on this path until you put me off. And she ain't left yet. The goal has always been to educate the community about the clinical research process, reduce healthcare disparities, educate the community on why the patient voice needs to be heard, and how education around the truth about clinical restrictions impacts treatment options. Equally important is that healthcare professionals understand the root issues that cause lack of trust in healthcare and research and change their attitudes and beliefs to better trust minorities and the LGBTQIA community. Gaina is the Director of Global Feasibility and Site Engagement at AstraZeneca and also the President and Founder of Genesis Medical Research Group. They have actually created a diversity certification for healthcare and clinical research professionals that unapologetically address healthcare disparities on social media and community platforms. So look, that's the lady, that's the woman, right? But we can't do nothing without you men that are listening. We need you, right? It's important that we do this together, right? So we're going to get to Mr. Barry Holmes Jr. He's a remarkable individual with a diverse background with a diverse background, excuse me, stands as a testament to resilience and achievement. A Navy War veteran, thank you, sir, for your services, and retired basketball player. Barry served 2 tours in Iraq, exemplifying dedication and discipline. Beyond his military service, he is a devoted husband, father, and stepfather, balancing the demands of family life with his pursuit of personal and professional excellence. Transitioning from military service to civilian life, Barry embarked on a journey of continuous growth, pursuing a bachelor's degree in strategic business management, laying the foundation for a career that would fuse his diverse experiences. In 2014, he entered the healthcare industry, earning a certificate as a medical assistant. His overseas service uniquely positioned him to engage with underserved and minority populations, providing insights into their needs and establishing trust and rapport with patients. Barry's journey took an unexpected turn when he met his wife, opening the door to the world of pharmaceuticals and clinical research. Armed with a wealth of research knowledge and hands-on clinical, armed with a wealth of research knowledge and hands-on experience with patients from diverse backgrounds. So together, they are making it. Together, they are making a difference in not only the African American community, but as I stated earlier, in all under-resourced and vulnerable communities is where they are. Barry's currently holding the esteemed position of Vice President of Genesis Medical Research. Barry has not only excelled in his professional pursuits, but has also contributed significantly to the field. His expertise led him to co-write the diversity certification curriculum for Genesis Medical Research Group Academy, leaving an indelible mark on the industry. Barry Holmes Jr.'s story is one of triumph over adversity, blending military discipline, healthcare expertise, and business acumen into a compelling narrative of success. His journey serves as an inspiration, showcasing the limitless. So, without further ado, because they have a lot to say, and there is certainly a lot that we in the African American community that we need to know. There's a lot that people outside the African American community need to know. However, with this being Black Health and History Month, we want to make sure that the impact that we have as a healthcare professionals and how we can make a difference, a positive difference in the lives of so many, how we make this a showcase. So Barry and Gaynor, I'm going to turn it over to you and you can go ahead and give us your education.
Thank you
Well, I'll
very
just
much.
say thank you before Barry gets started. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, and thank you for having us here today. So I'm just going to hand it over to Barry.
I wanted to reciprocate that thanks as well. Thank you very much for such a wonderful introduction. As you've already stated, Genesis Medical Research Group was created with the mission and vision of understanding that there are gaps in between pharma and clinical sites and their patients. And we understand that that gap is due to a lack of trust within the healthcare industry. We've created a certification program for healthcare professionals and clinical research professionals to become more educated and understanding and confident when engaging minority and underserved patients, whether it be in their own healthcare, helping to educate them and to be more resourceful in being a part of their own healthcare, and also recruiting them into clinical trials. We understand that the need for diversity in clinical trials is paramount after the FDA has put out a guidance in the DEPICT Act, making it mandatory to have a certain percentage of underserved and diverse populations in clinical trials. So we understand that the sponsors now are looking for ways to make sure that they are being inclusive when recruiting for clinical trials. So this is the way that we have presented ourselves and our company in order to be able to assist sponsors and CROs in their mission of recruitment. In regards to the community and what we want to do for our people is to make us more aware, become more educated, and to hold ourselves more accountable when it comes to our own healthcare. By us creating this certification, we understand that there is a gap and that there needs to be some type of understanding and median met in order for patients to be more engaged. But we also need to hold ourselves in a high regard as well to become more active in our own healthcare, in our community, in activities that may be going on inside our community having to do with healthcare, such as this podcast and this event you're holding right now. For the companies that are involved in community engagements, receiving and learning as much information from them as possible regarding health, because whatever you may learn, whether you may hear today or at another date, it may not be useful for you today, but it may be useful for a friend or a family member later. We must continue to understand that as the healthcare and the pharmaceutical industry evolves, we need to make sure that we stay in tuned and stay engaged and a part of the forward progress that they're making.
Okay. So I'll just go ahead and get started because I think it's really important to delve in a little bit into the community aspect of it. And it's going to be hard for me to hold myself down in this seat, Sandra. I'm so excited to be here. And I just want to go over just some background about just talking about the legacy of unethical conduct in clinical research and why we don't trust doctors in any type of research. In the beginning you said don't sugarcoat it, so I'm not going to sugarcoat it today. And that has been the foundation of what Genesis is all about, is we do not give fluff. And we know in order to make a change is that we're going to have to be truthful and honest about it. We already know that our history has caused so many challenges in gaining trust, and it is understandable from our perspective. We understand why that there's a lack of trust, and because of the situations that has happened to us in the past, we don't trust anybody, in terms of our health care, whether it's the government. We are suspect and we have a right to be. But here we are now. There has always been a low participation from our community in clinical trials. No one wants to be a guinea pig. That's what people will say. I don't want to participate in a clinical trial because they're not going to treat me like a guinea pig. But the reality is, we are all patients and we will have to take medicine one day. We all have to go to the doctors one day. So even if you take Tylenol, if you have to take a diabetes type of medication, it all has to go through the process of testing and go through the clinical research process to get approval. My concern is, and my duty is to share and spread awareness around clinical research. I'm not telling you to be in a study. I'm saying that you need to know what your options are. What does it entail? In order to participate in a clinical trial, we need to know about the process and how we're protected. In order to bridge the gap in healthcare, it is fair to say, like Barry just mentioned, we have to take accountability and the healthcare industry has to take accountability. We all have to take accountability for our own actions. But trust has some power in it. There was never trust from the beginning with healthcare professionals, and we try to give our healthcare professionals that type of trust, but we've been disappointed in the past and even the current time. And now we have to lay the groundwork and really start with the truth regarding our history before we can even get anywhere. Now, it's not just our history, it's everybody's history. But if we just go back 100 years, and 100 years is not that long ago, but it has enough time span that we can also go back and talk to our grandparents and aunts who know and lived through some of the situations. Like, for example, Tuskegee. The Tuskegee syphilis study happened for 40 years from 1932 to 1972. This study exploited Black men. They withheld treatment to observe the disease, to look at the progression over all of those years. For 40 years, researchers knowingly observed these men and watched them go through the course of their disease and let them die and suffer even after treatment was found. Now, could you imagine the devastation and the families, the impact on the communities, to think that you were receiving some treatment from physicians who came to your community and said that they were coming there to help? Another case of unethical conduct is Henrietta Lacks. You may have heard about her in her Immortal Cells from Henrietta Lacks. There's been a movie that was made about Henrietta Lacks. She was a black woman who died at the age of 31 from cervical cancer in the 1950s. Her cells were used without her permission, and that's a major violation because all patients should receive consent and understand what type of treatment they are in. That's a major violation not to get a patient's consent and understanding what's going to happen during a clinical trial. These researchers used her cells to model breakthrough medications like the polio vaccine, COVID-19, and cancer treatments that we use today. Her cells are still being used for many different experiments going on right now, and they're called the HeLa cells. And because so many of these situations has happened, whether it was Tuskegee or Henrietta Lacks, many of us have our own stories where we felt like we were mistreated or a loved one was treated unfairly, or how a doctor or a nurse may have treated them in a hospital or made them feel like they were less than. Many of us have our own stories where we were supposed to be cared for, but those healthcare professionals treated us with lack of sensitivity. The healthcare side needs to take accountability, be transparent, and incorporate cultural competency and engage in the community. In order for us to participate in healthcare research, we have to be unified and we have to be involved as a community. We have to hold positions in research and we have to be the ones to deliver the message to our community, but we on our end have to respond to that call as well. We have to be engaged. On our side, we have to engage back, whether it's through social media, whether it's a call to action. We need to be involved, especially when we are the ones on the front lines. We are fighting this battle because we know the truth. We know what's going on behind the scene. And one of the movies that stuck out to me was Menace to Society when Kane's grandfather asked him, "Do you care if you live or die, Kane?" Kane said, "I don't know." And this has a profound impact on the way of thinking. I think this health issue is not new. We have just gotten used to the way of life. We become so desensitized that it has become a way of life. It reminds me of the smoke detector that needs a battery. We don't even hear it after a while. It's like that beat just becomes silent to us. So it comes to a point where age just start to creep up on you and that battery, because you need to take that smoke detector battery out at some point. Age start knocking on our door. Death may start knocking at your door. We have to be engaged as a community. It's not someone else's responsibility. It's our problem. It's not anyone else's problem. It's our responsibility. The number one killer is heart disease, and that's for everyone. The second leading cause of death is cancer. That's for all people. African Americans make up 13% of the population. I was just looking at some statistics today, and did you know that Latinos are the largest minority group now? They make up, I think, 19% of the population now. But just put a pin in that. But we have the highest rates of death in heart disease, cancer, diabetes, COVID, kidney disease. All of these diseases, we have the highest death rates related to chronic illnesses compared to any group. And it has many factors that's pertaining to that. It may be due to a late diagnosis or no diagnosis. It may be due to socioeconomic factors, lack of access, or it could be systemic racism. But we need to take action. Your action just means sometimes just showing up, paying attention, responding, and sharing correct information and not myths. We have to do that within our community. The healthcare industry is now working on ways to increase diversity, but we can't change the system without our involvement, without your involvement. Or it will take us, it'll take away or we just going to take what they give us. The end of 2022, the FDA set a law to require pharma companies to increase diversity in clinical trials. And we need to understand that this is very important. This is very important that the clinical research process fundamentally is designed to ensure that we have the opportunity to make an informed decision and to be involved in decision making in healthcare. For a study to be conducted, there is a process. You can't just say you're going to conduct a study. The company has to submit their proposal, it's a protocol, to the FDA to get approval. The doctor who is the researcher then has to get have to have experience, be evaluated, and be selected by the sponsor to even be considered to be a participant as an investigator in the clinical trial. And then it has to go through an approval, which is the local IRB at the hospital or institution where the research is being conducted. So I just mentioned two layers of oversight, the FDA and then the local ethics committee, which every hospital has and everyone has to go through to participate in clinical research. That could be a central IRB or a local IRB in their institution. So the FDA and those two. Just so you know, these are an ethics committee, a body of people who sit together to discuss the proposal or the protocol of what the clinical research study is and what the patients will have and all the logistics behind the study to make sure that the patients are safe and protected and that this is going to be a study that's going to give value and benefit to the patient. As patients, you need to know that you have options. Medicine is not like it used to be. We are doing research that can help target certain mutations that may only be for from a few people. Medicine is becoming so specific that only a certain group of patients could take this medication. So it's not like it used to be. It used to be able to used to take a medicine and it could be for everybody, but now it's becoming very specific because we're studying patients at the genetic level. But always remember in a clinical trial, patient care always comes first. You have a right to privacy, and the pharmaceutical company will never know your name. They only know your test values or your lab tests. They know what your medicine was. They just know the details about the study, but they don't know your name, your address. They don't know anything about you personally. Only your physician has that information, and that's just by law. The patients do not have to. That information is not given to the pharmaceutical company. The other thing I think is important for you to know as a patient is that you have the right to withdraw consent at any time during the study and without any retaliation, and your physician won't be mad at you. That's just part of it. You can withdraw consent at any time. And a lot of people don't know that placebo in a study is no longer a dummy pill. If you're in a clinical research study, placebo means that you're getting standard of care versus the new experimental treatment, the treatment that's under study at that time. So that means you're getting the best quality of care of treatment that's on the market for, say, for example, if it was breast cancer, you're going to get the treatment that is top of the line versus, the experimental. So you're never going to not get treatment so that they can compare the results to see if the treatment that's being studied is better than the best treatment on the market, because the FDA will not allow you to just have a drug go under development if it's not going to be better than what we already have on the market. Also, one of the things I think it's important for patients to know is that trials now actually provide transportation if you need transportation in some cases. They're flexible in terms of some of the procedures. You might even have procedures done at home. You might have to wear a device or something like that to track your heart rate. They may have the centralized trial where you don't have to drive far to get to the trial site. But understanding that there are risks to studies, because I don't want you to think that it's really easy. There's a lot of work that goes behind it. You have to track and document some of the experiences that you have during the study. It requires a lot of testing, a lot of oversight, blood test documentation, and updates. But this is so that you can get the benefit of learning about if this drug is effective for you or not. And most people do not understand, part of the process in developing a drug, it costs $1 billion for one drug to go to market. So the drug that you might see sitting on your counter at home cost $1 billion before it came to your house. Most people don't know that depending on the drug, it could take 10 to 15 years for that drug to get developed because it goes through the multiple phases. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And most people don't know that a drug has a patent for 20 years before it becomes generic. So within that time frame, you have mostly 10 to 15 years to develop the drug. A lot of companies may only have 5, 7 years to actually sell that drug before it goes to patent. So just imagine you come up with a new drug and you have to go through a phase 1 study which is in healthy patients, and it's usually in a small population just to make sure that it's safe, unless it's an oncology drug where you get some signal if the treatment actually works for phase one. For phase two drugs, or for phase two study, excuse me, is safety and efficacy, which means that we want to know if it's safe and works in a smaller population, because you don't want to expose a drug to a larger population and have them all over different places and they're all getting sick. You want to centralize it and keep an eye on those patients to make sure that you're testing their blood, that you're looking at their liver, you're looking at all the different testing to make sure that those patients are safe. And then you have a phase three study where there's a larger pool of patients where you're looking at safety and efficacy and you're breaking up the data so that you can come up with a conclusion to be able to determine if those patients are actually being, you know, they're receiving a drug, that the drug is actually working for those patients, and multiple statistical analysis are being done to make sure that they can tell a difference if the drug is actually working better than that drug that I talked about, the placebo, the care that they're taking for those patients with the current therapy. And then we also have phase four studies or surveillance studies. This is after the drug is approved. They're still looking at the drug to make sure that it's safe. And the doctor who may prescribe the medication once it's approved is, you go back to your doctor and you say, I took the medication and it gave me a headache or something. They actually capture that information and send it back to the pharmaceutical company because they're tracking it. They know they have, like say, if you studied a drug for 17 years or 15 years, we still will collect that data to find out if there are some trends in the data that we didn't catch in the first collection of data that we had. So it's very, very intense. There's thousands of people involved on the research side of it. There's thousands of patients involved in the clinical side of it. There's study coordinators. And most of the studies, when we think about it, people don't really think that it's not just in the US. Usually the studies that are being conducted are global. It's not just in the US, they're on all different continents of the world, and they're all being tested and on the same type of protocol. And they usually follow the guidance of what the FDA is doing, but every country has their own ethics committee as well to ensure the safety of their patients as well. So I'm telling you this because I want you to make an informed decision. You don't have to participate in the study, but at least you know that a placebo, they're not going to give you a dummy pill. You're going to get the standard of care, and that you can withdraw at any time. Those things matter, you know. So when it comes down to it, the FDA is requiring that pharmaceutical companies recruit diverse patient populations. And the benefit to us as the African American community is that now drugs are being developed based on your genetics. And if we're not involved in studies, we won't even know if the drug works for us. And I think even as a bigger picture, like say for example, if you've been diagnosed and you have a certain type of illness, or if you have a certain type of cancer, if it hasn't been studied, potentially your insurance may not even cover it because there's no data to support that it works in this patient population. I'm thinking because drugs are so expensive, at some point a drug company may, uh, the healthcare system may say we're not going to pay for it. So these are considerations as well. And we can say, yeah, let someone else, get tested, but then we know it works in one population and not another. And there is some data that show that for even in asthma for children, we did a workshop on that. Our chief medical officer, who's the expert in genomics. I'm not an expert in genomics, but one of the studies that she shared was that asthma in Puerto Rican children was they had different effects than regular, than African American children or the rest of the cohorts. And they had to really look at the data to determine what were the issues in between the races. So maybe they need to increase the dose, maybe they need to decrease the dose, maybe there were some factors that weren't even exposed in the literature, but we have to be involved in it so we'll know what works for us. So the treatment can be devastating for us because a lot of times we don't get screened. So we, instead of getting a early stage stage one or stage two type of Diagnosis, a lot of times we don't go to get screened for mammograms or for cancer, and we find out at a late stage where treatment is very aggressive. And one of the things that Genesis is doing is making sure that we promote getting screened, getting mammograms, prostate, colon cancer testing, to make sure that our community is paying attention to those things, because what end up happening is we end up getting treated late with the aggressive treatment, and then those treatments don't work for us. So the medicines that are being developed and are studying for those who participate in clinical trials. What if our participation meant that it changed the dynamics of treatment? We just don't know, because we know even though they used Henrietta Lacks, her cells without permission, something about us is just so powerful. And there's something about changing the game with us. If we participate in clinical trials, who knows that we might be the cure for cancer, with our blood cells. So if we don't participate, we don't know. And to be honest with you, sometimes I think about, if I would participate in a clinical trial. I've been in, as Sandra said at the beginning, I've been in this industry 25 years. I would have to understand the protocol. I would talk to the physician, the study coordinator, and really understand what the risk and benefits are for me to participate in this clinical trial. I want to know the details. And you have that right. It's not a bad thing to ask them questions. And the more questions that you ask, the more informed patient that you are, and the better patient that you'll be, and more compliant, or a patient who would adhere to the protocol. So, one of the things that I also wanted to mention is that I think that we can make a difference. Someone should be explaining to each person who determines that they want to participate in a clinical trial, whether it be your physician or whether it be the nurse, or the study coordinator, so that you can make an informed decision. So, from the FDA perspective, they are requiring diverse patients to participate in the clinical trials. If we are not studied, how are we going to know? So I just want to end this just by, letting you know that it's the accountability on the healthcare system side, and that's where we're trying to tackle it from Genesis, is letting them know why there's a lack of trust, and understanding why there are health disparities. And on our end, that we take accountability and start taking action, that we are involved in community engagement, and when there's questions, and really engaging in our healthcare and taking accountability for ourselves, and doing the right things with healthcare. So now I'm just going to hand it over to you, Sandra, because I know you have some questions for us.
I do have some questions, but before I go into the questions that I have, I do want to say this, and I thank you so much for bringing it up. We have plenty of patients out, in our community that don't know what a clinical trial is. They don't know. I heard something, but I'm really not sure what I heard. They need someone to actually explain it to them. And in explaining it to them, they need to actually be able to reach out to people that look, because I'm African American. There's only so much I'm going to trust from somebody that's telling me something that's not in my culture, that doesn't understand where where I'm coming from when I'm making these statements or making these choices in reference to my health. So we have to be able to put all the resources out there, all the options out there. Perhaps you're not sure what's out there. So this is the importance of having both you and Barry here, Genesis Medical Research Group here, is because this is an option that many people overlook. And I know, because I've talked to patients that have overlooked becoming a clinical trial participant, because they don't know the truth. Like, they're like, well, I heard something and I would be interested, but I still got questions, right? And I don't trust the people that are telling me these questions, that I can go to have them answered. I really don't know. So it's important for us to recognize that we have representation. There's a number of stakeholders when it comes to clinical trial research and clinical trial participation. And we have a number of stakeholders that are of our culture, that understand us because they are us, that are available to speak to us and share additional information on us. Because guess what? You know, how many times I personally know people that have lost their lives because they didn't have medication for their treatment. My oldest sister was one. They didn't have treatment. They didn't have medication for her treatment. Now, mind you, this was years ago, but I sometimes think, okay, well, what would have happened if, like, we had, and this was before the advent of social media, but what would have happened if she was able to participate in a clinical trial? So, those of you that are listening today or are looking at this later, what I do want to say is this: when you hear the word clinical trial, think about not just yourself, but think about your loved ones, those who are in your community, in your family, or your friends, and they're struggling. They need some additional help, but they're really not sure where to go. They don't trust medicine. This is why they don't trust it. They really need someone to talk to. Engage in a conversation with them with clinical trials. Say, okay, well, what's your drawback? Why don't you participate in a clinical trial? Here are the benefits. You want to hear some, you want to hear some, here are the benefits. And having clinical trial participants who have participated, whether they participated successfully or unsuccessfully, have them actually talking to those patients, right? To say, well, this is what I went through. You might not go through the same thing, but here's what I found out in going through this. So, if the conversation and the information that you're sharing with us, it's very, very important that we all know about it. We all know that, hey, there are African American owned companies that are out here in a clinical trial space, whether it's research, whether it's the actually running a trial, whether it's, magazines and writing articles and all this other kind of things. There are African American professionals who are invested in your health, who want only the best for you as well as everyone else to be able to successfully be a clinical trial participant. I do have Dr. New. She is saying hello, and I also have Carolyn Coleman who's listening in, who's saying hello. What I do want to ask you is this: if you participate in a clinical trial and it's unsuccessful for whatever reason and you have to drop out, right? You just like have to withdraw. Do What happens at that point in time with that person? Are they eligible to get into another clinical trial? Is there a waiting period that they have to go through before they can become active again in a clinical trial?
Yeah, it just depends on the inclusion exclusion criteria. A lot of times, for someone to, if someone has participated in a study, they may have to wait for about 30 days or just to make sure that that patient doesn't have any more of that trial drug in their system so that it doesn't have any type of concomitant reactions or some reactions to that drug, so they'll wait potentially 30, 60, 90 days depending on what the protocol would say. But oftentimes if a patient has to withdraw because due to whether it's they can't handle the medication, or if the patient just feels like it was unblinded, meaning they know what the drug is because they started on the medication, it may have unblinded the drug, they might feel it, that usually it's just their physician who's their provider will care for them at that point. That's what the physician will be responsible for, is the care for that patient after the patient have withdrawn from the study. But also if it was due to side effects or something from the study drug, the sponsor will be involved in that as well.
And so, does a patient know, like upfront? So, if I went today and I wanted to participate in a clinical trial, will I know upfront before I become before I become a participant? Will someone be able to tell me, okay, well, here is the criteria. If you don't work, then you got to wait 30 days, 68, or does a patient wait until they're like in the middle of treatment, say, and then they're told, you didn't, this isn't working, or we have to withdraw you from this trial? Is it something that's told up front, or does the patient have to wait?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the trial investigative site, and they'll give that information to them. at the beginning of the study, they should be able to explain to them what the qualifications are, and if they have to withdraw, what would be the next steps for that patient. So that should be the case for participating in a clinical trial.
And I do see that Myra Fonville, and Myra, if I pronounced your name wrong, I'm sorry, blame it on the head, not the heart. She's saying we need people like Barry and Gaynor who will educate the community regarding the reality, benefits, and importance of clinical trials, while also educating clinical research professionals on how to engage with the community. And Myra, you are spot on. You really are spot on, and that's the benefit of bringing African American um, communities, business owned, when it comes down to healthcare professionals to the table, right? Because they see it from both sides. They see it from their professional background, and they also see it because it's a lived experience. Whether it's them themselves or someone that they love and have seen go through, they've seen it. So why would I mean it would make total sense to have more berries and more gainers out in the community saying, look, let's do this, and this is why it's important to do it. And showing some of the benefits. I could talk all day. Barry and Gaynor could talk all day about this. But unless we come and we actually able to show what we're talking about, that talk becomes lost. It becomes garbled, right? It's garbled together. Nobody's really understanding because nobody's showing. Everybody's talking. Nobody's doing anything sustainable to help out. So Myra, I
And
do
Sandra,
believe
I'll
I'm with
add
you.
this. I'll
Hmm.
add this. The question that you asked about, do they tell them when we do our training? We make sure that we tell them when you're working with our group of people, you need to be very specific and explain this. You need to walk through the steps with the patient and from the beginning to the end. I mean, we have different samples and how to communicate effectively to Black women with breast cancer. We talk about prostate cancer. We have examples with colorectal cancer. I mean, we can't cover everything, but we have a model that they could follow to make sure that they're informing patients, because that's how you build trust. That you be honest with me. You tell me what I should be expecting. That comes along with the trust. Because if I find out something during the trial that you didn't tell me what to expect or what the expectations were for me as a patient, then that's where the trust falls apart. And that's one of the major problems why we don't participate in clinical trials. We don't want surprises. We want to know exactly what to expect during a clinical trial. And what we do is we talk to different healthcare professionals, whether it's the physicians, the study coordinators, people who are in direct relationship with the patient need to be trained in certain aspects. They are health professionals and they have a great level of education, but cultural competency is very important and is a very sensitive situation in dealing with people who have chronic illnesses, and you're asking them to participate in the clinical trial. You know, there's a lot of confusion they may already have because of their illness, and then a lot of confusion around how they may feel about participating in a clinical trial, and that's understandable. You know,
That
that was a good
indeed,
question, Sandra.
that is indeed something that we all need to take to point. But another question on the back of that one. I know that you say that you give that to the researchers and you give that to the people who are working on from the clinical side with the patient. But does the patient get that information as well so that they too know exactly what they should be expecting and what not so much what they should be expecting, but what they should be expecting from the clinician who's actually working with them through this trial? Does the patient, or if not, is there a way for the patient to get the same information that you guys are giving to the clinician?
It's not a formal setup. There's starting to be more, people who are like you, who are advocacy groups, or different people who work in community engagement are starting to be educated. And we're starting to even educate different people outside of our scope of healthcare professionals. We're starting to work with community engagement professionals, advocacy groups. We're starting to work with all those people who work directly with patients in some capacity to understand how the whole system works. It's kind of a broken system where there's a lot of gaps, and we're trying to fill those gaps with education and customize our training so that everyone is doing their part. Because patients do need a navigator. They do need to understand, well, if my doctor don't do clinical trials, can I go somewhere else that have a clinical trial? Can I drive out of the state? Well, you can drive out of the state, but we want you to also let your physician know that you're going to be participating in a clinical trial and have that site know where you're from. There's some logistics behind that, but people wouldn't know. So now there are, places and how to position people so that we can be more connected and more streamlined in this process. But it is a system that is being worked out and trying to think of. But just think about this: if the pharmaceutical company and the clinical trial sites have to be aligned. They have to be aligned, and they have to understand what the needs are for patients. The sites work on behalf of the pharmaceutical company because most people don't know the pharmaceutical company does not have any contact with the patient at all by law. They are not allowed to talk to the patient, right? So it's up to the sites to be able to communicate with the patient. The community engagement group and different people can share and spread awareness to patients. They can give them pamphlets to say, what is a clinical trial and what's expected during a clinical trial? What is a placebo? How many visits? Because they can make a trial specific brochure, or they can make there's some brochures that are available that just tell you what a clinical research study is, but some clinical trials actually give you details and tell you how many visits you're going to have to come, if you can stay home, and whether you have a tracking watch on your heart rate, different things like that. They should tell you. But sometimes some studies have it, and depending on how long the trial is ongoing, the study may have those types of details in it to make sure that this patient stays in a study. Because imagine if a study is 18 months long, and you have to go once a month. That's a lot for a patient to have to be a part of, and that's a responsibility. So that is a commitment that they would have to be made aware of, that we expect you to come for this, and it's for your safety, because it may be measuring safety every 30 days to make sure the drug is properly coming out of the body like it should. I'm trying not to be too technical with the peak and the trough and different things like that, but just ensuring the safety of the patient over time and making sure that they are adhering to the protocol in terms of taking the drug one time a day as prescribed by their study physician, making sure they don't crush or break the medication, things like that for the patient. So they should be informed.
Yes, and I'm glad you said that. I would hope that, all studies, no matter where they are, no matter how long they are, do give the patient a uphand synopsis of this is what's to be expected. This is what you can expect to happen with this trial. This is what we're looking at. Just so that the patient is more aware of what it is that's going on, right?
So I'll
Because a lot
jump in that too. I didn't
of
mention that, and this is the biggest deal of the whole thing, is an informed consent form. you know, Before a patient even gets any medication or has any evaluation, the patient has to sign an informed consent form. And they write it so that the patient can understand it. I think it's at a fifth grade level, just to make sure that every patient can understand what the informed consent means. It shouldn't have technical terms in it. It should be clear so that anyone can understand. And if it's in a different language, if it's a Spanish speaking individual, the informed consent should be in Spanish. If the population where the trial is being conducted can be translated in Spanish. So the informed consent should have what the expectations are, what the medical treatment they're going to be receiving, and it should be explained to the patient. Sometimes, it's a little bit more lengthy. It could be, I don't know, about 20 pages. Myra probably could chime in on that as well. But an informed consent has to be signed so that the patient can know what is expected during the trial.
Well, I am certainly glad to know that. Yes, we, you know what, with every surgery or with every medical procedure that's past a visit, we should all be making sure that we are aware of exactly what it is we're doing. And I did want to actually bring this up. The importance of something that you just said gets lost a lot of times in speaking, right? Especially when we're speaking to patients and we're giving out information, and that is this: the clinical trial is not for you to go running away from your doctor. It's not for you to leave your doctor's care and say, "Oh, I'm in a clinical trial now. I don't need him or her no more." The clinical trial participant should be in close communication with their primary care doctor, letting them know, "I've signed up to be in this clinical trial. This is what it entails. All the information, the medical information that you need to give to your primary care doctor, give it to your primary care doctor, so that your primary care doctor, whatever the clinical team is, as well as you as a patient, you can all work together for the best health outcome. Leaving one or the other out of the conversation when it comes down to your participation in a clinical trial is really not something that's desirable. So, once again, make sure that you're talking to your physician, your primary care physician. I do want to turn the conversation over to Barry somewhat because I don't want him to think that we forgot all about him. So as a medical research, overseeing the medical research, the section with those who are interested in becoming a clinical trial researcher, right? How long is the process for them? And is there any, like, do they need to have additional schooling? Is it, you can have a high school diploma and be able to be, what are the criteria for you to be in as considered a researcher?
Well, yes, there's definitely some additional schooling that you would have to partake in, and in order to become a master of your craft in anything, you would definitely have to take some type of training, some type of courses, in order to become informed enough to be able to educate someone on the topic at hand. So there are plenty of ways to get started, plenty of different avenues that you can begin in. There are companies like Black Women in Clinical Research and Black Men in Clinical Research. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention them, that are doing things in order to help people with their resumes and find open positions that are available in order to get into CRA positions, and get started within clinical research.
So, about how long does it take for one to say, okay, I'm going to sign up to take this course, and when I'm done, I really want to be a CRA, so that's why I'm taking the class. How long does it take? What's the entire process for them to go through?
Let me jump into that one because we more focus on clinical trial diversity training. So our remit is more focused on the diversity aspect of it. And what we do is make sure that they understand how to care for African Americans in clinical research.
Okay, so with that being said, would someone have to already have their CRA, or could they come in, take the CRA through Genesis Medical Research, but know that it's primarily focused on the diversity side of it? How would what does that look like as far as a student that would want, that's interested or might be interested in becoming a CRA?
So I would say like someone who is a healthcare professional, you can be a medical assistant. And if you wanted to take this training and you have face-to-face interaction with patients, this will help you. We're not requiring that you have a bachelor's degree, or if you need to have a master's degree, this could be for someone who has a degree or someone who doesn't have a degree at all. If you are facing a patient and you're talking about clinical trials, this is for you. It could be someone who works in advocacy, community engagement. It could be a volunteer, because the fundamentals of our program, we talk about clinical trials. and most people have some understanding about clinical trials or patients, this would at least give you the foundation to understanding what you need to do, how you need to relate to patients. But most of the people who take our courses are working in clinical research already. People who want to be a CRA need to understand this, or they're currently in a CRA role. It could be a physician. It's multiple of roles. You could be in pharmaceuticals and not see a patient. Just to understand what is the process, what do the site need to consider. So so we wrote it so that different perspectives can see how we all need to come together and be able to take into account the FDA guidance, how to relate to patients, thinking about patients from a pharmaceutical perspective. Because part of the program too that we have is talking about the diversity action plan. So we talking about from a community engagement perspective what that toolkit looks like. How can they benefit? How can they help streamline a process to get patients more involved? So it's really not about how much education somebody had prior to in terms of like a degree per se, but if they have experience in clinical research and they want to work with patients, if they want to impact patients in some way directly or indirectly, our program is for that. Now, part of our workshops, I do say we do talk about what a phase one study is, phase two, because there are different levels of education that clinical coordinators have at the site. I remember, I worked at a trial site fresh out of college. I didn't know what an institutional review board was. I didn't know the difference between a phase two and three study. I had to learn these things as I went. So there's different levels of learning and different levels of education, and site coordinators, study coordinators have different experiences, but our training can help people understand the fundamentals of clinical trial diversity. I hope
And I
I
thank you
made
for that.
sense.
I do see that Carolyn Coleman is saying she's enjoying this topic and she's agreeing with what Myra said in reference to having more people such as yourself and Barry out in the community, in clinical research that can tell us what we need to know without showing the fluff, right? You know why you
Mhm.
need to be in a clinical trial? I mean, we didn't get to that level tonight. You know why you need to be in a clinical trial research? This is why you need to be in a clinical trial research, right? Just breaking it down and bringing it out and stretching it out because we need to know. We now know, but we need to actually we have to keep, unfortunately for our community, we have to keep hammering that point home on why it's important for you,
Absolutely.
not just you, but you, your children, your children's children, why it's important for everybody to understand and know, and if possible become a part of that clinical trial, of a clinical trial research in whichever health condition is impacting you. And I do see that Myra is saying, to answer your question, the amount of time it takes to get into the industry, it varies. And she's also saying it could take years to enter the industry, whereas others might get the opportunity in months. And I thank you for that, Myra. And I just based on what Myra just put in here about it may take others, years and some the opportunity to months. How big of an issue or how big of a role does it play with? Okay, you want it, go out there and work and get it, and you won't have to take you 5 years to become a clinical research assistant because you're applying what you're learning and people are paying attention to you versus just sitting back and going to school and just chilling out after or taking classes and just chilling out after you take the classes. How big is opportunity and determination tied into how long it takes in reference to becoming getting involved on a serious level with clinical research?
I'll just say most of the people that I talk to in clinical research, we didn't choose this. This kind of chose us. you know, I can say like I wanted to go to medical school and I worked as I wanted to be assistant to the physicians. They were also surgeons. So I watched them and I kind of got into clinical research, taking some courses at University of Penn. I just kind of fell into clinical research. This wasn't something that I was looking for, that I knew about. And when I talked to other people in the industry, they didn't know about it either. So it was like, you know, it kind of just happened. So once people find out a little bit about it, they figure out, how can I get into this industry? Can I get into pharma? And usually it starts working at a clinical trial site or something. Most people start out as a study coordinator or in a business role, and because there's also tons of roles within the pharma industry that you can do. But sometimes it's just, just knowing someone in the industry and telling, you finding out about, there's opportunities in pharma. But the funny thing was, I thought that I would be a doctor, but I found that I can help people just as much in the role that I have and make an impact. And I feel like, I'm fulfilling my purpose and doing what I'm doing on my job every day. And by the way, everything I say has nothing to do with my current job at AstraZeneca. Everything I say is all based on Gaynor Whitaker at Genesis Medical Research. I have to say that. But it's a great opportunity to make an impact, and usually I try to tell other people who are interested in the sciences about this opportunity in this field. It's a wonderful opportunity to be able to make a difference and see firsthand how it goes, because we need to be stakeholders, we need to be decision makers, we need to be informed. And that's how we could build trust, because we're on this side of it and we could tell the pros and the cons, and how a study is designed, or what goes on during a clinical trial. So
And
I'm really thankful every day. I still pinch myself every day and like, I can't believe I'm doing this you
well,
Let
know
me
and
jump in
and you
real
bring
quick.
up a good point, right? Because in reading Barry's bio, that's exactly what happened with him. He would have never thought that he would be, and I might be talking for him, so I'm sorry if I am, but just in reading his bio and seeing how he got into clinical research and how he became involved in the research section of it, it goes to what you just said is true. I mean, it found you. And Carolyn, Myra is saying sometimes you have to be willing to take a step back in order to move forward. And that is so true. That's in every industry. You have to be able to say, okay, let me step back and recalculate and get myself together and get my thoughts together and then keep going. But you have to persevere. You have to want to do this. Carolyn is saying that it's great that you found your purpose. And then the final comment from Myra is saying, I was a retail pharmacist for 15 years before entering clinical research. It was, there goes that magic word again, it was a choice. We all have choices. When we have those choices and we know we have those choices, and sometimes when we don't know we have those choices, we need to be in search of those choices. What are those choices? What is the research? What are the options available to us with our career or outside our career for us to be able to do something that we feel, that we have a passion for? She's saying she took a huge pay cut to start a career as a CRA because she knew it would be beneficial in the end. And sometimes that's what you have to do. I used to teach school students, and I would tell the students this. I'd be like, you know what? At the end of the day, if you're working a job and you get offered a job with a position and it's good pay, look at it and see what are the actual benefits that you're getting out of it. Because if you're not getting any benefits, you can take that good job for a good 6 months to a year, but then you're going to leave it. And then what's going to happen then? Or you're going to be so miserable at that job that you're not going to really do a good job of it, or you're going to get burnt out. Any number of things can happen to you in, when you take jobs just based on salary. So sometimes you got to take a pay cut in order to be able to persevere and get to that end point, which is where you want to be. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and close out this interview for this evening. Before I do so, I'm going to ask both of you to leave us with 3 tips that you would say. Again, I'm going to ask you to cover the clinical side. What would you say to the patient? What would you say to the clinical team? What would you say to the pharmaceutical companies when it comes down to? And I'm glad you did put that disclaimer in. But before I go further, I want AstraZeneca to know They have an asset on their team. They should be extremely proud of the fact that we actually had, that we actually have in our community, which represents you, someone who cares about the patient, because she doesn't have to. She could get her, do her job, and at the end of the day, go home, and that's it. But that's not what she does. She gives back to her community. So with that, she should be acknowledged, and so should AstraZeneca, for actually having her in a position in which she can grow and continue to give back to the community. So Carolyn Coleman is saying, does Barry have something to say? And Carolyn Coleman, Barry usually lets Gaynor talk. But this is a secret that he doesn't know about just yet, but she does. She is going to be one of our lovely speakers at the Women's International Women's Month that summit that C.H.L.M.S Medi-Helpz is hosting throughout the month of March. And Barry will be back by himself in June for the men's summit on men's health. So he's not gonna be able to count on Gaynor. He gonna have to fly it alone. So I'm just not telling him that, but he's gonna do it because we and him got it like that. So tune into June. Come back in June. So you
Barry is the better speaker anyway.
can, so you
I
can
do
hear
want to say
what
this.
Barry what
I do
Barry
want to say
has
this
to
before we
say.
do
And
get off.
look, Barry, you got a cheerleader because Carolyn Coleman is saying, "Yay, Barry!" She's like, "Thank you, Barry." So you didn't know it. I just blew it on you. So we'll talk about it later.
Thank
So
you,
Dana's
Carolyn. I
on.
appreciate that, Carolyn. Thank you so much. I did just want to make mention of two things, as you ladies have eloquently said a few times this evening, and it made me even think about it, even in the midst of this presentation that we're doing about persevering, taking a stand, making a decision that's not only beneficial for you, but for your family and loved ones in the future. So I just want to first encourage all fathers, such as myself, especially us 40 and up, to get up off our high horse, take down some of that pride and some of that ego, and go on and visit that doctor. Step inside the doctor's office. Tell them everything that's going on right now with you. Tell them about your fingers that are tingling, your toes that are tingling. When you get up, how hard it is, and it hurts in your lower back. Believe it or not, they really, really, really do want you to come in and tell them what's going on so that they can give you some definitive answers that will help in your healthcare. So please, fathers, all men, please step up, step in, and lead from the front by making sure that we get these physicals that we need and getting ourselves checked out as much as possible. The second thing that I wanted to make mention of, as Myra is in the audience, again, about perseverance and about her journey and everything that she's done in the time that she's been in the industry. And she made it a point to chase her dream, and she's created a magazine that's called Interim Visits. I'm not sure if everyone can see it on the camera. um there we go. Interim Visits. So she has a few magazines right now, a few entries right now that are available. But what it does is talks about the specific cities that she may be featuring within the magazine, talking about the different places to travel, different places to eat, different attractions that are going on. And inside the magazine are also authors that have written articles about different topics within healthcare that are also from the city and from abroad as well. And every issue that she puts out every month is going to be featuring a different city. So I just wanted to make sure that I plugged that in and plugged her in her magazine, because we truly are looking for sponsors that are willing to uh, participate and see the vision that Interim Visits has for the community and for the industry, and that will want to sponsor and take part in this movement.
And with that, Barry, I'm going to say thank you very, very much for bringing it up. We didn't. She's saying, "Wow, Barry, she wasn't expecting this. Thank you." But I was hoping that either you or Gaina would have. So I'm thanking you as well. Brought her up because earlier on I mentioned that with clinical trials, you can be a clinical trial participant, you can be a clinical trial researcher, you can also write articles on clinical trials. Getting the information out there however you can is very, very, very important. So, Myra, thank you so much for that magazine. Thank you, and I wish you continued success because this is the thing, and something that Barry just said we need to pay close attention to is this. She talks about different cities, and she brings in, points, high points, or highlights these different cities. It's important for us to keep these cities in mind because a lot of times what happens with health is that there are geographical issues. So a health challenge that which is why it's really important for us as African Americans to get involved with these clinical trials is because a health condition that's predominant in Florida might not be predominant in Boston, Massachusetts. So if all we got is people from Florida participating in these clinical trials, well, guess what's going to happen to all of the people that's in Boston that have different health conditions? They ain't gonna get help. There's not gonna be medicine that's gonna be able to help them. Medicine and health conditions are predominantly geographically based. They cut across the geographic. So while one is in one area, somebody else might be in some place. You might be wherever you are. So it's important for everyone on a global level and on a national level. If we're African Americans, if there's a clinical trial that that's good for us to join, that we at least find out more information about that. Dana, I'm going to ask you for two. Let's have two from you, and then we will close it out for the night. Two
So
tips.
for patients, I think we have to be engaged. We're all patients. All of us need to be engaged. When we see a post, if we see some call to action, we need to open up our eyes, open up our ears. When we hear that smoke detector, we need to react to it and change that battery. We can't be desensitized to the situation and think about that. Do you care if you live or die? We have to be awake and realize that nobody's coming down here to fix this problem for us. We have to fix it ourselves, or we just going to take what they give us. We have to take action. So, from our side, we have to take accountability. And to the pharmaceutical companies, is be real with us. Listen to what we say, not what you want to hear, because there won't be any change if you want to just take fluff. People can create materials and say, okay, here, this is cultural competency, but you won't see any change or in diversity. And it's hard to deal with the facts of what happened in the past and have the real conversation. But Genesis is about really having that real conversation that has to be held. I started talking about the history and I talked about accountability of what happened in the past. But then there's accountability for us too. So we have to come and have a common ground. But we can't start anywhere until we have that foundation built from the bottom. Is dealing with transparency. Yes, this stuff happened in the past, but now we have to now build together. We have to start with transparency, but we have to on our end hold up the banner and say we're going to fight for it. We're going to do it ourselves within our community. You, me, Myra, Barry, Carolyn, all the people that's around. That we're going to move forward, but you guys got to show up. You got to support us. We're not just talking to ourselves all the time. We need some engagement from our people to say, this is what I want. And they give us the feedback. Yes, you're doing a good job. Or no, we're not doing a good job. We need their engagement in it. So it's that we work together and build our own future, the direction that we want. That's where the power comes from, is when we unify and we figure it out. And then we tell them, this is how we want it. So I think it's all about us really having that transparency.
And with that being said, I'm going to close out with Myra ask, and I'm going to add something to Myra's ask. She is saying her ask is that she get articles from all of us, Barry, Gaina, Sandra, and Carolyn. And Myra, just tell me what you need me to write on. I'm going to be really honest with you. You might not get it to July, just based on my schedule. But I'm more than happy to write an article for your magazine. I just need to know what you would want it on. I'm sure Carolyn, I'm speaking for her because she's one of my board members. So I'm sure she'll find some time to put something together because she's interested in this. And I actually also like to, there's one person in particular that I would love to see write an article for your newsletter, for your magazine, I should say. And I'm saying this name. I'm sure she's not watching this right now, but I'm sure at some point in time she will watch it. And that's because what Barry and Gaina stated has a lot to do with what field she's in, and that's Jay Palmer, who is an excellent, excellent, excellent culturally competent consultant. And I'm quite sure that she would put together a magazine article for you that would just speak volumes on what and how clinical trials and cultural competency, the different, the similarities between the two, and what cultural competence means when it comes down to CRA. So with that being stated, I want to wish each of you a good night. I'm not sure, people are watching. I'm not sure what time of the day you will be watching it, but as I've stated from the beginning, from day one, and we're on day 26 right now, but from day one, I've stated the links to all of the shows that we've done throughout the month are available. We want you to ask for them, because in asking for them, that means that you're going to be showing them to someone. That means that my motto of each one, reach one, teach one, however way you want to put it, is actually met. The goal that I have for our mission as far as our foundation is to bring that knowledge forward to help as many as we possibly can, especially in the under-resourced, the vulnerable communities, and the disabled communities, to make sure that they are able to, if they want to, because not all of them want to, but those who want to have the best health outcomes have access to the best health outcomes. Tomorrow, day 27. Day 27, we are going to be focusing on the key factor in everything that we in healthcare do, and that's the patient. So we will have Ms. Jewel Dukes coming on. She is going to talk about Blacks and rare health conditions. And many of those that suffer or are challenged with rare health conditions would be excellent to be able to know more about the clinical research period and the clinical research trials that's out here to try to help them. So please, if you're not busy tomorrow, which is day 27, join us with day 27, where we are actually focusing in on what this month, Black Health and History, it's all about, which is the patient. So with that being said, I am going to close it out. Thank you, Barry, and thank you, Gaina, for both of you for being here today.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so
Thank
much,
you for having
Sandra.
us.
And thank you
Have a great
everyone
night, everyone.
who's
Thank you
listening
so
in.
much for joining.